Alrighty, well, welcome to Healing the Spirit Within, and thanks for being here. My name's Catherine Needham, and we're here to talk for the next 3 days about spirituality and what it means. What does it mean, like our spirit, and how does that relate to shadow work? And so, who I am is I'm a coach. I'm a spiritual coach, but I really started getting into this work through shadow work. So I don't know. I know Lisa's on here. Sheila, I'm not sure how familiar you are with shadow work. But as I've been doing this work and seeing the trends that are happening, like there's a group that I have on Facebook here, it just kind of prompted me to start to put together something where we can talk about this component that's kind of like, I haven't talked about it. I didn't talk about it in my book either, but it's spirit and spirituality. So as I mentioned, I wrote a book. It's called Healing Through Shadow Work. And we do have a group. We have an online group. Lots of people are a part of it. And I wrote this book after really doing many, many years of shadow work. Well, I'll say 4 years, really focused on what I'm calling shadow work, but a lifetime of being, very spiritual and, self-improvement, following all those kind of things. And so after I put the book out in September, I self-published the book. I started, and then just kind of watching the trends in the group and the things that people were talking about. And what I'm noticing is there just seems to be what I'm calling is a crisis of spirit. People are just like, especially if those folks that have kind of been raised without any kind of spiritual practice. So some of the things that we'll talk about over the next couple days are how all of this fits inside of this thing I'm calling healing through shadow work, and how we can really get back in touch with our spirit, connect with it, and use it as a source of inspiration, as a source of solace, as we do the shadow work, which can be it can be hard, it can be lonely. You might find yourself crying all the time. I was crying, healing the wounds from the past. So I've broken shadow work down into three big concepts, three big, what do I call them? Containers. And one of those is relationship healing. The second one is inner work. And the third is what I'm calling outer work. So today we're just mainly focusing on relationship healing. And the first relationship that I really want to focus on is the relationship with yourself. To me, that's your spirit. How do you feel? Your spirit is that non-physical part of you that feels. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to kind of get into beliefs and our thoughts. And we're going to talk about we're not going to get too deep into the inner work, but we're going to talk about the pieces that are a part of inner work. And so that is my thoughts, my feelings, my beliefs, my self-talk. All of these things contribute to how we feel. And I don't know if you've heard the expression, like, are you in good spirits? There's certain things that we use. Why do we say, are you in good spirits? What does that mean? How are you feeling? So some of the things that I've been seeing in our group, and just with talking to people and dealing with life in general, is that a lot of people are going through a spiritual awakening. And people are describing it in different ways, but it is essentially this sudden or maybe a gradual thing that you're just now slowly realizing, like something's not that it's not right, but I'm noticing things that I hadn't noticed before, and I don't know how to deal with them. Maybe you're discovering things about yourself or seeing things about the world around you that you didn't really notice before, but now you're noticing it and you're like, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling conflicted. And so a lot of times with the spiritual awakening, that's what's happening, where something is being like changing, there's a loss or a change to our life, and we don't know how to navigate that uncomfortableness to deal with it and get through it. And so in my book with shadow work, I came up with this system of how you can address stuff, not just your pains from the past, which of course we want to heal that, but a system that you can use every day. It's a part of, it can become how you deal with everything, the good and the bad. Because I found that as I did shadow work, once I really started healing some of that deep stuff, then you're like, okay, well now what? well, now you get to choose. You're more conscious of your thoughts. You're more conscious of how you're treating people. You're more conscious of how you're treating yourself, and you start choosing how you want to, consciously choosing. A lot of times with shadow work, well, that's actually the whole point of it, is it's the unconscious behavior. It's those unconscious attitudes, the things that we don't notice about ourselves, the things that we are, or maybe we do know, but we're ashamed about it and we refuse to talk about it, or we're embarrassed to talk about it. It's so many things. And so before we go too far, I'm going to read really briefly how I define shadows and shadow work. The shadows are the unhealed parts of ourselves that stem from emotional pain and trauma from the past. Reading from a book. Shadows are the part of our personality that we're embarrassed or ashamed of and that we hide from others. And shadows are also found collectively around the issues in society that we ignore or hide or are ashamed of. And I call those collective shadows. So we're going to talk about all that stuff too. But it's important to understand that in order to do shadow work, one of the things that I talk about in the relationship healing part of shadow work is this relationship with yourself. And so a lot of times you'll hear like, oh, you have to heal your inner child. Yep, yes, you do. That's part of healing the relationship with yourself. And so you're going to hear a lot of the inner child, this and that and the other. Now with the inner child, another thing that I talk about in the book, and that we'll talk about more over the next couple of days, is that we form beliefs about ourselves, and I'm calling it core beliefs. We form these core beliefs in childhood. In fact, I've read somewhere it's like by age 7, you have formed core beliefs about like who you are, what the world's about. So that's what I really want to get into today, because when I talk to people and I say, well, what are your beliefs? That's kind of a vague, everything is a belief really. But what I'm getting to are, what are your beliefs about spirit? What are your beliefs about the world, why we're here, that kind of thing? Because if your beliefs are not lining up with the experience that you're having in life, that's where you're going to feel conflicted. That's where you're going to feel out of alignment. You hear people saying, like, you're out of alignment. What does that mean? It means that your thoughts and your feelings and your beliefs are one way inside, but you're not expressing them on the outside. You're hiding them. You're saying one thing, but really feeling another. That can really make us feel out of whack, not aligned. So again, I saw a lot of people talking about a spiritual awakening right now. A lot of people are feeling very isolated and lonely, especially when they start on a journey of shadow work. We hear a lot of people saying it's a lonely journey. It's lonely because you have to start looking at your pain from the past, which is never fun. You have to start, looking at like your parents and just all the relationships and dealing with those feelings that come up with that. And that's probably the hardest part, especially when you're working and trying to grow and others are not. It's a very like, how do I communicate to people that I'm working on myself? How do I heal these things? With a lot of it is with our families, that we have to heal these pains from the past. So again, the point of this is that I'm seeing a lot of people, are dealing with this. I mean, and I'm sure that, COVID and the pandemic is not helping. But I actually think, and I said this when it started, I have the email to prove it, we can use this as a catalyst for our healing and for our growth. I personally did that with the big to-do in 2016 with the election. I had my moment then to really it was a wake up for me. If I don't want to say it was a spiritual awakening, I'll call it that for now, because that's essentially, it really got me on a different path where I was like, I don't like what I'm seeing in myself. I don't like how my friends are treating me, how I'm treating them. Like, this is just all wrong. Like, I just felt myself and saw myself acting out of character and I didn't like what I saw. So I just vowed right then and there, I'm like, I am changing right now. I'm going to say the thing, like all these things that I'm preaching about, and these funny little memes about be spiritual and create your own world or whatever. I want to do that and really put it to the test. I want to see if I can create if my beliefs will create my experiences and things like that. I want to work on my people pleasing, and I want to work on all these things that are hindering my ability to have healthy relationships. And for me, I was also working on my marriage at the time. So what happens for a lot of us when we start down this path of healing is that we start experiencing what you may have heard as the dark night of the soul. Some people call it that. I'm starting to see the dark night of the soul in a whole different perspective, but it's this period when you start to heal, and then you start everything needs to catch up. Like you do all of this inner work, and then like it's almost like your body needs to catch up because you've put it through, like, oh my gosh, I'm remembering all these emotional things, and just dealing with that and kind of like letting things settle. I call it integration. It's just a period where it can feel like nothingness, though. It can feel empty. So again, like some people are like, I'm feeling empty. Well, it could be that, or it could be you're depressed. But the other side of the depression is that I believe that we can pull ourselves out of it. And I say that because I pulled myself out of it. I've dealt with depression my whole life. I came from a family where, we didn't talk about depression. It was just everybody has their things, we didn't talk about it. Not the way people talk about it today. We didn't go to therapy and do that stuff. That's just not how I was raised. It was a different time. So one of the things in the book that I like to emphasize is this process that I've come up with to deal with these experiences that we go through, so that we don't have these moments of depression and don't know how to deal with. We're just stuck. And I've been there. I can say it because I've been there. Excuse me. So one of the things in like figuring out like what is my spirit, why am I having this crisis of spirit? I'm calling it a crisis of spirit, is because I personally feel that you need to do shadow work successfully, at least in the way that I believe it can be done, the way I have done it. You have to have a spiritual foundation. And that is just understanding who you are and this belief in whatever you believe in. Spirituality is typically described as a belief in a higher power. So however you want to, some people call that higher power God. I may say God here and there, but my spiritual journey has evolved. And I really hope that we can all start learning how to evolve our thoughts. Look at the things that we used to look at and then evolve it into the next level. Because that's what I think that's the effect that shadow work can have on you. You can look at the things that you saw before, the things that you used to look at every day, and see something totally new that'll blow your mind. And you'll be like, how did I not see that? And usually it's just things about yourself. Like, really? I've been doing that and I didn't even notice. Oh, wow. Sorry, family. So for me, I wanted to talk just a little bit about my journey, and just so that you can understand, we all have our perspectives of how we approach this work. And my perspective, and I'm very, again, they're just my beliefs that I'm putting out there about shadow work, but they're beliefs based on my experience. They're beliefs based on my observation and experience over years and years. It's not like I just did something. I'm like, hey, this worked, I'm going to try it out. I tend to be very skeptical and I'm very analytical. So when it comes to the spiritual stuff, even though I've been a spiritual person my whole life, that analytical side of me needs to understand the why. I'm like, please break it down for me. Show me what it means. How do I do it? Step by step, please. I need steps. So my journey started with, when I look at the 0 to age 7, what was being taught to me about spirituality, well, we went to church. We went to a Methodist church, African Methodist Episcopal, AME Zion. And those were just my early years. All I really remember about it was going to Sunday school and coloring. I thought church was about coloring. But what I noticed just from observing my family, and I grew up with my mother and my grandmother, they weren't like, fundamentalist about it, but they always approached, we went to church and they took what my mom and my grandmother showed me was how to take these things that we were hearing at church, how to apply them in your life. What do they mean? Like we would talk about stuff. So that's what I'm used to in terms of spirituality. Like we're able to talk, we're able to express ourselves, we're able to express our joy. And I grew up going to the Black church where you get the spirit. I don't know if you've even ever heard of that, but when people will get the spirit in church and stand up and start, I don't know, being filled with joy or something. We just called it getting the spirit. And when I was a kid, it made me laugh. So, I kind of I still laugh a lot. But that's how I just took it as like, oh, what's happening to so-and-so? And I would laugh. But now I understand that there is a feeling, there is a joy and an inspiration that many people get from this belief in something greater, and that is affirmed. And like, when you have an experience that no one can tell you otherwise. Like, I had a feeling, it was a beautiful experience. I experienced God. Some people have that experience in church. But again, like, it just depends on what so those beliefs of mine started with there's a God. He lives up in the sky and he lives in the clouds. I mean, when you're a kid, I don't know. Just gonna go and color. But eventually my beliefs changed. And I'm always very aware of, like, because it was a big part of my life, spirituality. And it also was influenced by my mother. My mother was a very big influence in my life, very positive influence. So she showed me how to connect with spirit. I saw her praying. I saw her meditating over the years. I saw her questioning, seeking answers, talking to the preacher, asking him about, like, what does this mean? And I saw this here in the Bible, and then this other piece over here, that doesn't make sense to me. She did that kind of stuff. She's kind of like me, but in a different way. She could go out and look at all these details in the Bible and all these religious texts and see the common thread and all that stuff. So she got me into, she kind of got out of the church because people were not answering, that she couldn't get the answers, and it wasn't helping her life. Like, it wasn't helping her to get through these tough times in life. And she was a young mom, and there were tough times. I remember them. So she started getting into, like, past lives and Edgar Casey. I mean, I could name all the things. She eventually ended up following a guru, an Indian guru named Sai Baba. And I got all into that too. And so that took my religious programming and expanded it. And this is why I want to talk about being able to look at your beliefs and see how they can be expanded. Is there room for growth? Do these beliefs, are they, how to say it? Can they encompass other things? Like, for example, what I believe now about life, I'm able to actually see that other people have their own beliefs, and that's okay. I don't need someone to believe what I'm believing. I just want you to be happy and figure your thing out. And I think through shadow work, I'm like, back to shadow work. With shadow work, I feel like it's like a back door almost. It's like this key to ridding yourself of everything that you are not. Getting rid of it is the hard part, because you're talking about looking at your pain from the past, letting it go. Forgiveness is a big part of the way I approach shadow work. And I believe you have to have a spiritual foundation to truly forgive someone, to truly let something go and accept it. Again, it's just, at the end of the day, that's my opinion based on my experience and my own belief, but it's hard to get into that forgiving space, because with forgiveness, you need to be able to have some gratitude, or you need to be able to appreciate it. So there's gratitude is a big part of this, a big part of shadow work, a big part of healing your spirit is being able to have gratitude. And again, the more examples that you have from people in your life, the better. And I happen to have two really good examples growing up. Well, more than two, but again, at home, I had my mom and my grandmother, who were very appreciative of everything in life because they had hard lives. So whenever there was something to be appreciated, like heat in the winter, they appreciated stuff. And they did it in like a nice way. So it would be like, oh, thank you, Lord, for, we kind of made fun. We kind of joked about it, but like, thank you for this heat. Joking, but serious at the same time. But the point of this being that they showed me, we need to be able to see our parents and see these people that influence us having these experiences. You can't just say, be nice to people, be thankful, and then I don't see you out being thankful or nice to people. Do you know what I'm saying? So I try to be very aware of that as a parent. Let's keep moving on. So one of the things with spirituality is being able to find a source of joy, find a source of solace and inspiration that's not in somebody else. You don't want to rely on a person to bring you that. And I had to learn that lesson this year. My mom passed last year. My mom passed away in February of last year, and it was a whole year of like truly understanding what it's like to not have that deep connection to anyone. And learning I've had to learn how to find that source of joy, but I'm finding the source of joy through the love I had with her and through the familial things that were taught to me, that's giving me appreciation for things that they taught me, the gratitude, how to tap into that gratitude, how to tap into that love, and use that to get through things. Basically, get through stuff is what you got to get through. One of the things I wanted to share was this. See if I can share a screen. Here goes nothing. I'm gonna share the screen. Can you guys see this? Hopefully you can see it. I can't tell. Can someone come off of mute and tell me if you can see this picture of an elephant? A quick yes or a no.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Like, I can't find the meeting controls either. Hold on. I'm sure you all have seen this or maybe even heard of it, but it's kind of to demonstrate how we all look at God in different ways, or we describe God in different ways. And it shows these blind men feeling this elephant. They're saying, like, what is it? Well, I think it's a fan, it's a snake, it's a tree. And the point of it is, we all are looking at the same thing, but we are describing it different ways, even with our spirituality, even within the spiritual community. So the point of it isn't that the elephant itself, it's the fact that there is a thing there. There is something that we are trying to describe. And right now I'm a little obsessed with a show called Young Sheldon. Don't ask why. I just discovered the Big Bang Theory a little bit ago, watched all the seasons, and they're like, you should watch Young Sheldon. And I just love it. I love his nerdiness. This is something I just relate to in a certain way. But I find it interesting about the show, the Young Sheldon and the Big Bang Theory, is that Sheldon is a science guy, and his mother is this fundamental Christian. And he's always like, I don't believe in God, stop making me pray. But he loves his mother so much. And the first episode of Young Sheldon, his sister says, well, you don't even believe in God. And he's like, but I believe in my mom. And I just thought that was so sweet, because that's really what it's all. You don't have to believe in this thing called God. You just need to believe in something that lifts your spirit, something that surrounds you with love. Like, all he needs to do is think of his mother, and he's in a state of love, a vibration of love. So how can we find that thing that takes us to that state? Because that's what I'm seeing is missing with a lot of people. What is your thing? And I always tell people, like, yes, you can get that inspiration and that feeling of love through your partner, through your children, through pets. And I actually think that's the reason why we have pets. It's to teach us empathy. And part of this whole thing with shadow work, guys, is it should be leading you to empathy. It should be leading you to compassion. And but first and foremost, empathy and compassion for yourself. When you have that for yourself, it just flows effortlessly to other people. You're able to understand where they're coming from. And that's what empathy is all about. Is not just pitying someone or having some sympathy. It is feeling their pain, feeling their joy. And so I try to share that whenever I have joyful things. I definitely try to share that joy with people in the same way that I saw my mother sharing her joy. She just loved life, and she was able to share that love and that spirit with everyone that she met. I just thought that was so wonderful. So did either of you have I guess I want to know if, like, have you seen this? Have you thought about, this concept of what does spirituality mean? Does it mean I have to believe in God, or, what does that mean to you? I'm going to stop sharing. So let me show that for a minute.
Yeah, this is Sheila. Hi. I was raised Roman Catholic, but it never sat well with me, and I always bumped up against their values. And for as long as I can remember, I remember thinking there's so much hypocrisy in the whole religious thing. So I actually went away from religion completely. And then later on in life, started looking at spirituality and what spirituality meant for me. So much of what you're talking about fits really well for me. And I think it's very much a journey into self.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Totally. Yeah. It's a journey into self. And it's like, I think it might be hard though. Like if you don't have that background, people are like, what do you mean a journey into self? And that's where I feel I can help people through my, how I'm describing shadow work. It kind of gently takes you into your inner world, excuse me.
Absolutely, because when you do that spiritual work, all this stuff, this is how I came to shadow work. And I didn't have a name for it, but I was doing it already. So then I started looking for groups where I could say, yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling, right? That's exactly what I'm going through. And there's so many levels to it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a continuous journey. It just is.
It is continuous. I feel like I learn something almost every day. I mean, not every day, but it's just continuous.
Yeah. And I love it when I think, oh, wow, how did I not see that before? Right?
Me too. I'm like, really? I was saying that to a friend yesterday. I'm like, I can't believe I. And for me, it was about, like, I went into this work. I know I mentioned the election. That was one part, but the other part was trying to work on my marriage. And the more, somebody actually asked the other day, like, I'm, doing this work, can I still be in the marriage? And you can. It's hard. It's hard if that other person isn't doing the work. But I'm like, I stayed in my head to. I didn't have a choice. It was a financial thing,
Yeah.
So when you do this work, that's the thing that can happen. It's like you may start growing. The people around you may not grow. You have to make those tough decisions. Is this acceptable to me? If I continue to grow and this person never grows, they're just like this. I mean, because on the one side of it, you are expanding your heart and you're having more compassion for people.
Right.
But on the other side, you're like, but I need to be treated a certain way. So there's just very complex. You're right.
It is very complex. Yeah.
And then the other thing I would say about, this religious background, I think it's really important because I feel like I meet a lot of people like you, Sheila. I mean, you don't seem like you're bitter about it, but like some people, if I just even mention it, they're out of here. Like I saw some people, they left. They probably thought I was talking about God the whole time or whatever. I'm like, okay.
But I think that's part of the journey too, right? Because you're waking up to that, right? And as you stop and reflect and listen more, then you can reflect on your past and how you got to where you are right now, right?
Oh,
and and it's just opening your mind and opening your heart, like you said, right?
Oh yes. I mean, like that's what it is, the mind and the heart, and then getting those in sync. You're absolutely right. One of the things that I had learned to have an appreciation for, especially because in my book, I really try to break it down, like do this and then do this and then do this and then do it. And then if that doesn't work, obviously that's not your thing, but and you tailor it to whatever you need. But I found that going through these steps, I was actually able to reflect on my my upbringing and the religion and how I was taught certain things. And I'm like, I had an appreciation. I'm like, I'm glad it taught me how to go within. That's what I got from religion. And I'm like, I think that's a good thing. I'm like, I don't need to throw it all away. I can take that one piece, which is a big piece, as learning how to go within myself. Some people don't need that. That's just how I happen to learn how to go with it,
and I had to throw all of the religious part away for myself at first. And then
Throw it away. Yes.
years,
Yeah.
it was years, like decades of going through what does spirituality mean to me and what does it feel like inside and am I doing that outside as well, right? And then
Mhm.
it's kind of like you come full circle and you think, okay, what did religion teach me? What are the good parts about what I learned that still fit for me, right?
Yeah.
You can throw away what doesn't fit for you, but keep what does. And it just makes you so much stronger inside.
Absolutely. I love it. Like, you get it. Yes. So one of the things I wanted to have you guys reflect on, you've probably already reflected on this, Sheila, but even in writing it down, I was like, oh, what were my beliefs? I wanted you to reflect on like what you were taught about spirituality as a child, like that the 0 to 7 years. And then what did you see that was practiced and demonstrated by your parents? Like, it's one thing to, you get the teaching through church, but like, is your family embodying the teachings? That was a very big part of my growing up. It's like, okay, if you don't embody the things that you're doing, then what's the point? Like that, I've always, that's how I was raised. So that's how I am with this stuff too. I'm like, is it working for you? If it's not, let's change it, you know? So just, I don't know if you want to share or just take a minute to think about like the childhood, the things that, because those are the things that go into our core, that they're so ingrained, and that can become part of that unconscious behavior that we don't even realize. It comes out in our unconscious behavior based on our beliefs. And so, for example, I was taught that there's a God and there's Jesus, and I was taught that I should be kind and help people in need. Like those are kind of the beliefs that I grew up with. But I also was able to see it being demonstrated through people. So that helps a lot to have, it wasn't just lip service. I was raised by people who, they embodied the things that they believed in, which is really important. And I feel very, very lucky to have had that. So again, when we have these, when we look at our beliefs, and from the book, I have a little equation that says that how's it go? Your inner child plus your core wounds equals those core beliefs that you have. So sometimes people are like, well, I don't know what my beliefs are. So we just try, like, well, let's look at your childhood. Let's look at the wounds. And you can kind of figure things out the more you look at all these things. But when we have, what was I going with? Looking at excuse me, and I call that the foundation of this work, is understanding that relationship of the inner child, the wounds that you received in childhood, and then beliefs that came out of that. Because out of those beliefs, we form behaviors and how we deal with others. But probably more importantly, we form beliefs about ourselves and behaviors about ourselves. So I'm always telling people, watch the story. What is your story, and watch the things that you say about yourself, because you're telling a story with every word that you say about yourself. Try to keep the words positive. Okay, let me get back to some of my things we were going to talk about here. All righty. So one of the other parts of spirituality something that I've experienced being online the last several years with my spirituality, is this concept of a spiritual community, which I believe there is, but what I've observed is that there's not like a one thing to follow. There's many different things, and people go down many different paths. So I have, there's the crystals. I'm into crystals. I have them. I'm not like crazy into them, but I like crystals. They're pretty. Energy healing. Some people really talk of therapy and coaching, going to psychics, doing moon rituals, like all of these things. I don't think there's anything wrong with these things. I don't want people to get the wrong idea, but I believe personally that with this shadow work, it will help you enhance whatever it is that you're into. And I think it's important that people know that this doesn't have to be so complicated. You don't have to be into 10 different things to be a spiritual person. You just need to be like kind and loving. There, you're spiritual. So you do not need to do all of the things to be spiritual. I think that's really important to know. And I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that, I want to get into that some more. Any thoughts on the things that you need to do to be spiritual?
Again, for me, it's such a personal journey, right? I don't think
Mhm.
there is any right or wrong way to go about it, so long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting others, right? Because it's all about the experience and
Yes.
going, I want to say deep inside, because that's the route I took, going deep inside
Yes.
and just asking yourself those questions about who you want to be. Uh, do you want the inside to match the outside? Right? It's all about what,
Mhm.
like you were talking about, alignment. It's about coming in alignment. And however
Yes.
you do that, I think whatever works for you is right for
Yes.
you. And remember that it can stay fluid.
Yes.
It's going to change because you're
Mhm.
growing all the time, right?
Yep.
And as you go on this journey, you just continue to go deeper and deeper. It's almost like an addiction, but a good addiction, right?
Right. It's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yes. And I love that you mentioned, like, literally what something that you said is exactly what I was, I've written down here. It was like getting that inner to match the outer. And that's why, I didn't do this in the book. I'm gonna do a revision of this, of the whole book, and put it into, I'm gonna chunk it out even better, um, into the inner work and then the outer work. Because I noticed that was the one thing that I'm like, I keep saying inner work, and I don't think anyone knows what I'm talking about. Again, if you have not done, if you're not a spiritual person or been brought up in a spiritual or religious way, inner work, I don't know what people think it means if you don't have any context to it. So I want to really get into that even more tomorrow. But this inner work is being able to look at and this is what I did, and I was only able to do it. This is like this double-edged thing here. I was only able to really hone in on my thoughts and my feelings and really understand them and really examine them once I got rid of every other distraction. And I had to get rid of the distractions through the shadow work. I had to heal certain things because it was just keeping me completely caught up in other things. So I was able to start watching my thoughts. And this was something that, again, I had learned 25, 30 years ago through this guru. He's like, watch your thoughts. Your thoughts create your reality. I've been like on that thing for many, many years, but I'm like, okay, I hear you and I get it in theory, but I don't in practice, do my thoughts really create my reality? And really? And so being able to get rid of the distractions through shadow work, you can really focus on yourself. And yeah, and do that observation and just kind of like break everything down and see um, how you've been behaving, really, and really identify that unconscious behavior. So our beliefs we know that we're programmed. Everyone's talking about you're programming. It's our programming is our beliefs, the beliefs that are in our subconscious that get put in there through repetition, through, we take it through our senses that we take in again and again and again. So, I know for the folks in the room that you're probably very aware that it's important to, be aware of the things that we're taking in through our senses, because we're literally just programming ourselves. And when I realized that, and once I got into shadow work, I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna talk about shadow work. I'm gonna program people. But it's that having that awareness of what you're looking at. Some of the things that I've been seeing online, especially with some of the memes that people put out, it'll be like, you need to do this, and if you're not doing this, it's like this things that you need to be doing. I try to now, I've gotten away from that because I used to respond to people when they put a question out, I'd be like, well, you need to do blah, 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 and you need to read this book. Well, you do need to read my book later. What it's helped me to get perspective and understand that everyone, like you were saying, Sheila, everyone is going through something. They're having an experience. It's not going to be exactly, it might be a little like mine, but it's not exactly. And so just knowing that alone should open up the door for some compassion, even if it's something that's like a total opposite of what you believe in. Just knowing, again, what we've talked about, that it's possible. People are having their beliefs based on their experiences. I mean, it's just that simple. So then it becomes, how do we How do we all get along knowing all this? Well, that's a good question. That's what we're trying to figure out. Another thing I thought was cool to think about was, you know, what is your superpower? I found my superpowers doing shadow work. Some of them, I'm sure there's many more to be discovered. And to do that, I had to start, looking at my positive traits. Shadow work is not just about all of the sad, painful things in your life. It is being able to look at the patterns in your life, but the good ones too, the good and the bad. And again, you need to have that good stuff in order to have gratitude. You can see how your growth, I mean, it's a cycle. It's a cycle like this, up and down. Waves, sine waves, sorry. So I want you to think about, and maybe you haven't discovered it yet, or you have an idea of what it is. And this is something I would do, like if we were in a class, this would be a writing exercise. We wouldn't just think about it. But you've just found out that you have a superpower, or maybe many superpowers, and you've had them all along. Kind of like we were saying, like when you do this work and you're like, oh my gosh, that moment where you realize that you have superpowers. I want to know what would they be? And then how would you use that power, that superpower? What is your superpower, multiple powers, and how would you use it?
I love that you asked that question because it's something I have denied in myself for so long. My superpower that I'm just starting to really accept, I mean, again, it's been years of self-growth, right? Is that I'm an empath.
Mhm.
And I denied that about myself for so long. But I'm really highly sensitive. And I remember growing up and being told almost my entire childhood and adolescence is you're too sensitive. Just get over it. You're just too sensitive, right?
Mhm.
So then I shut that part of myself down for the longest time. But I really do feel really deeply for people. So I'm embracing it now. And I use it in my work with people because I'm an energy healer
Oh, I love
and
it.
yeah, and spiritual coach. And yeah, so I'm just embracing it more and more and believing in myself more.
Yes, I'm trying to do the same. And something that I noticed is that not just, I've always been able to feel people's feelings too. And I didn't know what it was, but that's the thing, I was never told the things you were told because I was raised by people who also felt that. You know what I mean? It really makes a
Yeah,
difference.
it really does. Yeah.
Yeah. Shoot, I lost my train of thought.
You were saying that it's something you had too.
Yes. Oh, I was talking about like the feel, like when like you're talking to somebody and you can feel their pain, or
Yes.
you really can. I think on the other side of it, and as far as gifts go, or superpowers, you also have the ability to make others feel what you are feeling. So, and I mean that in a good way. I mean, like you can be up in the high vibe area and interact with people and connect and bring them right up there with you. I believe that.
You're right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we are just like superheroes. The thing I find with folks that have, well, with everybody, not just, there's like, I'm seeing two camps of people within my group, and it's the people that have had like more of a spiritual upbringing and been doing this work for years. I'm like, oh, this is called shadow work? I guess I have been doing it. A lot of people like that. That's how I was. And then people who are just like nothing, coming into this with like, oh my gosh, I'm suddenly feeling feelings and noticing things, and I don't know how to take this. But I also believe that we're living in a time where like our consciousness is expanding. Our awareness of ourselves, our awareness of the world. We're getting into a time when we talk about feelings, and we're understanding how important all these things are. The hardest part, I think, is that relationship with ourselves. I mean, I think we're our worst critic. And basically, like everything I've been writing to people within the group lately has been, be patient with yourself, be gentle with yourself, because it took me a long time to realize that I had been so harsh with myself, like loving everybody else, giving them the shirt off my back, but not treating myself the same way. And for me, it was kind of like the last part, and I'm still working on it. The last part of a puzzle was like, oh, get myself in order too here. I got to take care of myself and make sure that I'm, feeling whole and feeling fulfilled. And I think that's what spirituality gives you, that sense of wholeness and fulfillment, and that makes you feel good. I'm like, that's it. But getting there can be very hard. Again, if you don't have a practice, you don't have any frame of reference or context. That's why I think my book, I try to at least lay it out in the book this way. It can kind of lead you into a spiritual practice, but also show you as you're doing it, the exercises and reading stuff in the book. It'll also help you to understand how you have been treating yourself and how you actually can cultivate and develop self-love. We talk about it a lot. I'm like, I need to know. This was always me. I'm like, tell me what I need to do. 1, 2, 3. What does it mean? You can't just tell me you gotta love yourself. That's not good enough for me because I don't understand what that means because I thought I did, So the practical side of that is the thoughts that we think, the talk. The negative self-talk was a big one for me, and being able to just observe yourself and try to catch yourself every time that you're putting yourself down, saying something really negative about yourself. Think about where that's coming from. It's probably from these core beliefs, just saying. Again, it's just a big part of it is, well, really I would like to think it's an outcome of doing this work is that as you heal, the healing comes up or the healing goes down and pain goes down and the good feelings come up. And you really learn how to cultivate unconditional love for yourself. Because when you can get yourself in that state, that unconditional love, maybe by taking a few minutes to think on things that bring you joy, whatever that is, it allows you to interact and connect with others better. I mean, we're really just making connections here. That's what this is. We want to feel better and we need to connect to people. We've seen that being in isolation makes us feel terrible. We feel disconnected. And that's another part. I don't even think people realize what's happening. Some people do. But the long-term effect of, being in isolation, that's not good. So these are all things that we're thinking about on this journey. Understanding the importance of spirituality. And then tomorrow, I really want to get into and maybe do some more exercises I have ready around what we mean by inner work. So it's those thoughts, those repetitive thoughts, the feelings that come up that we associate with the thoughts. And sometimes you'll have the feeling first and then you associate thoughts with it. I really like to get into thoughts and feelings because I think they're important. And I think that's the place where science meets spirituality. The thoughts I like to categorize as the science part, and then the feelings are the spiritual part. Anywho, we'll get more into that later. So, as we are, I'm going to ask Sheila. Lisa's being quiet. That's okay. She's helping me in other ways. But one of the other things as we are awakening, we'll just say we're all awakening more and coming into this, being able to embrace our spiritual side, not just embrace it, but also express it. And I think that's where a lot of people are having trouble too. It's like, well, I'm feeling something, but I feel weird about expressing this with other people. I'm a little uncomfortable. I call that our woo. And a lot more people are starting to or wanting to express it, but maybe not even sure how. You're not sure if people are going to make fun of you. I've been through all these things. And I'm basically at the point where I'm like, I am just going to say what I want to say. It's just who I am now. So we're going to dig into what it means to do this inner work and how to look at our thoughts and our feelings and how they form our beliefs and how we can start reprogramming. We know, science has said it. Not that science is the end all be all, but science has proven through this concept of neuroplasticity that we can change our beliefs. We can rewire our actual brains. So, knowing that, what's to stop us from being real superheroes? Alrighty. I think that was, let's see what else we got. What else do we have? That was about it for today. Again, just talking about our spirit, our relationship with ourselves, always first and foremost, and then that relationship with I have too many notes, sorry. The practice of making that connection and tapping into our spirit, making that connection with the higher power or the higher, whatever it is that we're believing in, the practice of doing that and the awareness of that and how we approach that, that is what I call spirituality. And again, we all have our own ways of doing it. And I think that's one of the things that I bring to the table as a coach. I don't want to force my way of thinking, down someone's throat. There's certain fundamental things that I talk about here that are some beliefs that, like, well, if you don't believe that, it's not going to resonate in any way. But again, for the most part, this work is about finding your own way, and you can find your own way and your own unique thing, the thing that makes you you, and nobody else can do it but you. I discovered that through this shadow work, by getting rid of all the, letting go of the things that were false about myself, letting go of the pain, letting go of guilt, resentment, bitterness, all of that stuff. Worked through it. I'm no longer bitter. Anyway, does anybody have any questions or any comments? And I'm not, just FYI, I don't know who's looking at this. If anybody is looking at it through Facebook, I'm not even looking at Facebook, so I can only look at the chat in the Zoom. Do you have any comments?
I just want to say thank you so much for this session today. It's allowed me to reflect a lot and take a look at my beliefs, like as I was silent and as you were talking. And I'm really looking forward to what you have to say about the inner work tomorrow, because I really believe that when you do the inner work, the outer work will follow. It just follows naturally. You have to put in the effort and you have to do the actions, absolutely. But when you do that hard work inside, and it's hard work, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And it takes dedication, it really does.
Yes.
And but once you do that inner work, the outer just follows. It has no choice but to follow, because that's who
it really has no choice.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you participating and all of the awesome stuff you said.
Well, thank you.
All righty. Anyone else? Danielle or Lisa, before we sign off? We'll wait an awkward silence. Well, I appreciate you all being here. I really do. And we're going to continue the discussion. I'll have some more exercises tomorrow. So tomorrow's inner work. And then on Thursday, I want to talk about the outer work, how we take it from the inside to the outside. And again, I do believe it with Sheila. It should just, when you're doing the work, it should just naturally start happening on the outside. But I think sometimes we can get stuck in the world of social media and just posting memes about spirituality. And I want to make sure that we are taking it into the world and embodying the things that we believe in. All righty. Thanks again for joining. And I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.